Welcome, 7th grade. Today we're going to continue our review for tomorrow's test. In this screencast, we're going to go over some sample essay questions, similar but not the same as ones that you may see on the test. So as you can see, if you pull up on Google Classroom, you're going to have this document. So as I go through this, what I will ask that you do is listen to my sort of explanation of some of the questions and some of the things that I'd like you to do on the essay. Pause the video, then write your essay, and then I will sort of put in some answers that will sort of be like model answers for what you could have in your short answer / essay response. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first question that you see on here is describe what happens with your intestines when you have diarrhea. So this is one that we wrote kind of our practice essay on, and the main idea with diarrhea is that your intestines are not pulling enough water out of the stool as it passes through your intestines. So this can be caused by any number of things, but there's just some sort of irritation in the intestines and not enough water is being pulled out, so that means that your stool becomes very watery. So when we write this essay, we want to make sure that we answer the question very clearly in multiple sentences and use capital letters and periods. One of the things we definitely want to avoid is, some of these text message style things like using like lowercase I or U or things like that. We want to make sure we use capital letters, periods. So right now, I want you to go ahead and describe what happens with your intestines when you have diarrhea. And you're gonna need to hit pause on the video. Now that you've written your own essay question, let's go ahead and compare it to the one that I have written or that I'm going to write right now. So describe what happens with your intestines when you have diarrhea. I would start off by saying, when you have diarrhea, the main problem is that your intestines do not pull out enough water from the waste passing through. Because the intestines don't pull enough water out, this causes the stool to be watery. This can be caused by many different things, including bacteria, viruses, or parasites, which would be another word for sort of protists. So in review, what I have here is a very simple three-sentence answer that describes what the main problem is with diarrhea, that not enough water is pulled out, what happens as a result, the stool becomes watery, and what are the causes. So again, it's kind of like the symptoms, the causes. I don't ask anything about treatment, but there can be a number of treatments for this because you're losing a lot of water since your intestines aren't pulling them out. One of the treatments would be to add a lot more water and electrolytes that you are losing through the watery stools. So that is one thing. A question that you may have, or a question that may be the opposite of that, which might be related to sort of the opposite of diarrhea, which is constipation. And so there may be an essay about that, and that would just be the opposite. And in that case, with constipation, the main cause was that your intestines are pulling out too much water, or that you don't have enough water in your system, and the stool becomes very dry and hard to pass through the intestines. So let's go ahead on to the next question. Question 2. It says, what are the steps of the digestive process? Write them in order. Step 1, step 2. This is a fairly straightforward essay, but it's one that if you leave out or simplify steps, you're going to miss points on the essay. So I would probably call this somewhere between, depending on how much you include in your steps, it's going to be 4 to 6 steps in the essay. So go ahead, hit pause right now, write your essay, and then you can compare what you have written to what I write. All right, I'm going to go ahead and write mine. I'll start with step 1, and that would be to food enters the mouth and is chewed with assistance from the tongue and teeth. Saliva is added to help break the food down. That'll be step 1. Step 2, the food is pushed down the esophagus. And this is where you could include other things like the epiglottis. The epiglottis stops food from going down the windpipe. In this case, we're really just focusing on the food going down the correct pipe, which is the esophagus. So food is pushed down the esophagus via a muscle motion called peristalsis. All right, so then step 3. Food is now in the stomach. The food is then in the stomach and is mixed with acid and mushed around, I guess you could say. It's kind of a simple word to describe it, but mushed around to break it down more. Step 4, the food moves through the small intestine where 90% of nutrients are absorbed. Step 5, the food, or what's left of the food, what is left of the food moves to the large intestine where water and more nutrients are pulled out and go into the body. Would be a simple way of saying that. Again, we're not going to get super complex with our explanation. And then step 6 would be the waste that is left over is stored in the rectum and pushed out through the anus. So that would be a 6-step process of the digestive process. And if you were to write something with this sort of level of explanation, that would be a full points on your essay question. Let's move on to the next one. And this one is going to have a wide variety of answers. So I'm not really going to, you could have any number of things in this. But what I'm going to point out here is some notes about the essay question. It says, describe a healthy meal and tell why to include it in your diet. Here's what I would recommend. All right, I would just go down kind of the food groups, and I would talk about, I would say fruits and vegetables, something like this, vegetables, and then just say, list, I would eat, and then tell why you would eat it, ... So you definitely don't just say what you would eat, but also tell why you would eat these certain things. Then move on to grains, okay? I would eat, ... And then you want to explain why you would eat those certain amounts of grains. And then you could go on to dairy. I would eat, ... And then you would go on to the protein group. I would eat. One of the things I might add to this is something that you would also avoid. So for instance, in the protein group, you want to avoid a lot of saturated fat. So we want to avoid foods that have a high fat content. We want to make sure that we have lots of fruits and vegetables and also a good amount of grains. And we want to avoid sugars and different things of that nature. So there are a lot of million combinations that you could do on this. So right now I want you can go ahead and hit pause and just practice writing. I would eat and then explain why. So don't forget that the tell why point is very, very important. Hopefully you've completed that. Fruits and vegetables, greens, dairy, protein are a good healthy meal. And now you can move on to step 4. So it says, describe what would happen to each Cheerio if you put one in water, one in saliva, and one in hydrochloric acid. This is a question based on an experiment that we did in class. And a great way to do this would be to just say water, saliva and hydrochloric acid. This is how I would recommend writing this particular problem. So go ahead and take a minute, hit pause, and see if you can answer this essay question. Okay, hopefully you've written your essay question out. If we put a Cheerio in water, I would probably say that not much happens to it, since water is not an acid or a base. Saliva. Okay. The Cheerio will break down a little bit at a time because saliva is a weak acid. Okay. And hydrochloric acid, the Cheerio will break down a lot because it is a strong acid, and that's what we saw in our experiment. Okay, with the Cheerio, or the Applejack, I guess is what we used in our experiment, broke down and the hydrochloric acid turned black. It really kind of broke apart a lot and just got really mangled by the time we were done with the experiment. And the saliva kind of broke it down again like a little bit, and really nothing happened to the water in our experiment. So again, just based on our experiment that we did in class, you should be able to answer a similar question, not the same question, and then kind of talk about what's happening in each solution that we put a piece of food in, because that mimics kind of what's going on in our stomach. Now, if you are completed with your practice essay questions and you reviewed, one other thing that you can do here is, here are some practice essay questions. Here's a response from another student in a previous year. And this is his explanation of the steps of the digestive process. One of the things he talks about here is the teeth and the saliva glands. He talks about the esophagus. He actually skips the stomach. So one of the things he missed in here is he didn't talk about the stomach. So he says it goes down the esophagus into the small intestine. He skips the stomach. He talks about the small intestine and the large intestine, kind of lumps them together, talking about absorbing water and nutrients. And then he talks eventually about how waste is expelled from the body. So again, he's missing a couple steps in here, and that's one of the things that you want to avoid. So look at your essay question, make sure you didn't miss any steps. Here's another student, and here's what the student wrote for a similar question about what would be a healthy meal. And so he writes down sort of the different items that he would have in a healthy meal. The one thing that's missing from this is he doesn't give a description of why he was eating each of these things. This is a decently healthy meal, but he doesn't give an explanation as to why they are like that. And then finally, here's one more question, and this is, oops, I guess it popped in there. It says, this would be, what would be a cure for constipation, which we discussed earlier. He said you could get a type of medicine, or you could eat more fiber. One of the big cures, though, for constipation would be water. So if I ask you about treatments for something, for diarrhea, it would be to drink more water or Gatorade or things that have electrolytes in them. Constipation would be more fiber in the diet, and also more water. So if you have completed all these, make sure that you go through the review items that were on the assignment for yesterday, and you will be well prepared for the test.